Welcome to Skill Builder. I'm Robin Clevitt and I'm on the bench, I'm indoors, I'm out in the cold, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this new rear handled 18 volt saw. It's running on the 18 volt platform, it's the fuel version, it's high output. I'm going to take you through some of its features and tell you what I like about it. So I've been wanting to try a rear handle saw for quite a long time. Anyone out there has watched my videos in the past. I do a lot of first fix construction and I've lived my life by circular saws, mainly corded, but in the last couple of years, you know, I've moved over to cordless, and I've always wanted to try a worm drive saw, and this works on a similar principle to worm drive in the sense that the handle is at the rear. Now you might ask yourself what benefit that is, and I did ask myself that as well. That's why I was curious about trying this. And initially I was sort of thinking, is it an advantage? What's the disadvantage? And it wasn't until I started using it for some of the applications that I've been doing for years that I realized actually I can see what the difference is in terms of the position that I am, that my body is, and the very fact that instead of me stooping over the top of something, if the handle's further back, I'm a bit more upright. And also, if you can imagine, this is nice and long. When I'm marking a rafter, for example, I've got a piece of timber, a lot of my rafters are as big as this, and if I'm putting an angled cut on it, for example, what's nice about this is the body is on that side. So instead of me looking over the top, I'm just looking straight the way through. What I sometimes do is release the base, and I use it a little bit like a chop saw. I'll start off there, I'll plunge it down and push it straight through. Now, it's quite a weight this, and I've got a 5 amp hour battery, so I would say that's a medium weight battery of this range, because they go up to 12 and they go down as small as 2. But this has seemed to be about right in terms of weight and run time. So a couple of observations. You can see this has been out in the field. It is completely covered in sawdust, so quite wet sawdust. And this acted a little bit like a dustbin to me. And so this was getting filled up with dust. That's obviously the battery carriage. And the reason why it is the size it is, it will accommodate the larger batteries, which is particularly handy if I'm up on a scaffold and I'm 7 stories up and I'm cutting all the tails or eaves off a roof. I don't want to be running back down for a battery. And I don't like carrying these around in my nail bag in case they fall out. It's just one of those liabilities. You'll break it or you'll ultimately hurt someone. So a couple of the things on this particular saw. What's particularly nice is this is at the back, so it's really easy to see. There's a scale of measurements on here, which is fairly handy, provided you've got the correct blade, of course. The only trouble is this is in imperial. That's fine for me. I don't mind a bit of imperial. I'm one of these guys who reads a tape measure, and if it's easier to say 13.5 inches, that's what I'll cut it at instead of 362.5 millimeters. That's what I'll do it at. But that is in imperial. But this is an early saw. I'd imagine that as they become more popular in the UK, we'll have that in metric, I would hope. It's got a really handy hook, so you can find yourself hooking that on your work if you've got the, or potentially doing that, but it is a little bit on the heavy side. While I'm upside down as well, one thing I am impressed with, and this is not often the case with a circular saw, simple spanner for blade change, but it's hidden away underneath, which is quite nice, because although it's not the sort of thing that I'd be doing up on the scaffold or while I'm doing the roof, every now and then you might find that the blade is loose for some reason. I can never tell you why, because the way the thread works, it's always tight, but every now and then it is. So that's handy that that is actually stuck in there as well. It does run really well and it feels like a corded saw. They say that you're going to get 570 cuts out of it in 90 millimeters by 45. So that's 2x4 in American language. And I'd imagine, I'm not saying what they quote, which battery they quote that on, but I would say that that's worked out on a 5 amp hour, which is probably the average size that you're going to use in it. So as I say, I've used it on a roof. I cut a roof with it. I was pretty impressed with it. I had a little bit of arm pain because of the fact that it is quite weighty, but it's a 66 millimeter depth of cut. It needs to have a bit of weight behind it, and if you use it correctly, that is actually in your favor. So when I'm cutting off rafter tails, so I've got all of my eaves coming off the edge of the roof, I've pinged a line through, just the weight of that glides itself through. You know, I'm literally holding it and just steering it through. There's no pushing involved, and it's actually quite nicely balanced. If you look at that, I've ripped down sheets of material with it. This will cope with a couple of sheets of 18mm OSB pinned together, no problem. It will drive its way through that. It does have a fence, but if you can see with these fences, even if you want to get a 6-inch rip or a 150mm rip, you're going to struggle with that because of the fact that that's about on the limit there. So it's quite handy, but all I'll do is I'll pin a straight edge down and I'll run the saw against the straight edge. I've done a few jack cuts, so compound cuts with it, and it handled them quite well. It did get through the timber, a 47mm thick timber at 45 degrees, pretty close mind. On the whole, it was pretty good. It has a port here for dust extraction. The only thing is it's got a bogus size nozzle on it. So instead of plugging it into my general carry around, I use a Festool dust extraction kit. It doesn't actually fit that, so a little bit of tape or an adapter is what you need. It's got 5,800 revs per minute. The blade is 190mm. Maximum depth of cut, 66mm. Also, it's got a brushless motor, very important. The overall length of the saw is 480mm, so it's significantly longer than a side handle circular saw, so you're not going to creep it into all those little spaces, but it's not really designed for that. And the weight of it is 4.8 kilograms, and to put that in perspective, my corded circular saw, which was my sort of stablemate, main stablemate, was 6.6 kilograms. It is lighter than what I've been used to, but I'm a bit older now, so I need it to be a bit lighter. I'll just pull the trigger and run it up. You'll hear it start. It hasn't got a soft start, but it's not particularly jolty. But it's got a fairly good electronic brake as well. I'll just do that again. That's quite handy. There's the Milwaukee Fuel 18-volt rear-handled circular saw, and it's a really nice addition to the toolkit. Something you have to get used to, especially my little wrists. They needed to get used to it. I hope you've enjoyed my take on it and some of the footage that you'll see using it.